Imagine walking through the streets of your city and hearing the sound of feet pounding against cobblestone. Rhythmic, frantic, unrelenting. You follow the sound and come upon a crowd. Dozens of people are dancing, not with joy, but with desperation etched into their faces. Their arms flail, their legs tremble, but they don't stop. Not for hunger, not for thirst, not even for pain. Over days, the crowd swells, some dropping lifeless to the ground. And still, the dancing continues. What could cause such a thing? Was it madness, a curse, or something even darker? This is no legend. This is the true story of the dancing plague of 1518, when the people of Strasbourg, France, found themselves consumed by an unstoppable force, and no one could explain why. It was the summer of 1518, and the city of Strasbourg, part of the Holy Roman Empire, lay under a heavy, sweltering sun. The kind of heat that made the air shimmer and turned every breath into a chore. Life in this medieval city was harsh. Plague and famine lingered in recent memory, and the weight of survival pressed on every shoulder. I was just a scribe at the time, a simple observer, recording daily life and the goings-on in the market square. But in July of that year, something happened that would burn itself into my memory forever. It began quietly, with one woman. Her name, I later learned, was Frau Trophaea. A wife, like many others, going about her duties until something snapped. I remember hearing whispers about her in the market that day. "She's dancing," they said, "dancing with no music." I laughed it off at first. Surely someone had misheard. But when I made my way toward the narrow streets near the tanner's quarter, I saw her. She was alone, standing in the middle of the cobbled street, her bare feet pounding against the stones. Her arms swayed, her body twisting and convulsing as if controlled by invisible strings. Sweat dripped from her brow, her face red and contorted with effort. There was no joy in her movements, only a frenzied, mechanical rhythm. Her feet were bloody, her toes raw, but she didn't stop. People gathered, muttering prayers under their breath. Some stared in horror, while others turned away, shaking their heads. "Frau Trophaea!" a man yelled. Her husband, I think. He grabbed her by the shoulders, but she twisted free, her body spinning back into that awful, silent dance. By the time night fell, she was still moving, her silhouette lit by the flickering glow of torches. The next morning, I went to the same street, half expecting Frau Trophaea to be gone, or worse, lying dead where she had fallen. But she was still there, still dancing, her feet leaving streaks of blood across the stones. What frightened me more were the others. By then, a small group had joined her, 4 or 5 people, all moving in the same unnatural rhythm. They danced through the streets, oblivious to the cries of their families or the warnings of priests. People began to panic. Some claimed it was a curse sent by Saint Vitus, the patron saint of dancing. Others whispered of witchcraft. Within days, the group swelled to dozens. They spilled into the market square, their feet pounding in unison like an army on the march. The city guards tried to corral them, but what could they do? These weren't criminals. These were neighbors, friends, whose bodies had betrayed them. The city officials were at a loss. Physicians examined the dancers and proclaimed it to be an ailment of the blood. An excess of hot blood, they said, as though such a thing could explain the madness in their eyes. Their solution? More dancing. A wooden stage was erected in the center of town. Musicians were brought in to play drums and pipes, the rhythms echoing like a heartbeat through the streets. The idea was that the dancers would exhaust themselves and be cured, but it only made things worse. Days passed. The crowd of dancers grew to over 400 people. I watched in disbelief as the square became a writhing sea of bodies, faces pale and hollow. Men, women, even children. Some screamed as they danced, their voices ragged with pain. Others were silent, their eyes vacant as puppets. People collapsed where they stood, their legs giving out beneath them. Some were carried away on makeshift stretchers, their bodies limp and lifeless. Others simply died. Their hearts gave out, or their bodies crumpled under the strain, leaving them sprawled like discarded dolls. And yet the dance went on. I will never forget the sound of their feet. A constant rhythmic pounding, louder than the drums, louder than the priest's chants, louder than my own pounding heart. At night, when the square finally emptied of onlookers, the dancers remained. Shadows against the moonlit stones, they moved as if locked in a trance. The sound of their feet like rain hitting stone. I couldn't escape it, even in sleep. The noise echoed in my mind, growing louder until I woke in a cold sweat. The authorities tried everything. They prayed, they held processions, they burned incense and scattered holy water, but nothing stopped the dance. By August, the plague had begun to wane, just as mysteriously as it had begun. Fewer dancers appeared in the square, and the wooden stage was dismantled. One by one, the afflicted fell still, their bodies finally free. Some recovered, their lives forever scarred. Others vanished into their homes, never seen again. No one knew why it happened. Some blamed the heat, or ergot poisoning from tainted rye, a hallucinogenic mold that could drive entire towns mad. Others believed it was divine punishment, or a mass hysteria brought on by the city's endless suffering. But I wonder. I remember standing in that square, staring at the place where the dancers had been. The cobblestones were stained dark, as though the earth itself had absorbed their pain. And I wondered if it was something deeper, something older. Perhaps the earth beneath Strasbourg remembered ancient rhythms, rhythms that called to the souls of men and dragged them into the dance. Perhaps it was not St. Vitus, but something else, something that waits in silence for the moment when it can rise again. Even now, when I walk the streets of Strasbourg and see the stones glistening with rain, I hear it, the faint sound of feet pounding just beyond the edge of hearing. Perhaps it is nothing but my imagination, or perhaps the dance is not over. Perhaps it waits, for you, for me. For the next time we stand too still and listen too closely to the sounds of the earth beneath our feet. Until next time, remember this. History is filled with mysteries that refuse to die. And sometimes, the strangest horrors are the ones we cannot explain. Thank you for listening, and sleep well, if you dare.